I'll call to order the Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 Town Council Committee of the Whole regular meeting to order at 6:33. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Parker, who will be late because she's attending a TVCCA meeting, and Councilor Jones, who will not be here today. I just want to start by having a moment of silence for the school shooting that happened in Texas, leaving 14 students and 1 teacher dead. Thank you. On to calendars and communications. Councilor Kasiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 13th, I attended Recovery Fest at Pequannock Plains Park, and I just want to give a big congratulations and a thank you to the students for recovery from Groton Tech for bringing all of those services together. I know that I was able to get a lot of good contact information for services to help Groton, and a great job hosting an honest and informative event shedding light on the topic. On May 14th, I participated in the Beautification Committee's effort called Groton Clean Up Your Act. Just went out in my own neighborhood and picked up trash and nip bottles. I think it's a great initiative to encourage our residents to get out and help our community and hopefully show everyone that we don't need to be a part of a club or a committee. We can just all put in effort to keep our community clean and sustainable. I put out a social media post, or several social media posts, on my 4 referrals that I will hopefully be able to bring up during other business today. But I received a lot of great positive feedback and interest and some great suggestions on those. I also received various communications regarding the Citizen and Police Committee, issues with speeding in the Ring Drive, Quarry Road neighborhood, Mystic Education Center, Noank Memorial Day Parade, great news from State Representative Conley that we may be securing bonding for the seawall, Mosher Ave Bridge, and the RTM budget process. Thank you.
Councilor McBride.
Hi, thank you. I have not much to report tonight. It's been a relatively slow period for me the past couple weeks. I was away for a lot of it. But I do want to report that tomorrow we will be having the Property Reuse Committee being held at 5:30. That will be Zoom for anyone that would like to join. And I've been reviewing a lot of the Groton television matters on the budget. So that's about all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westervelt.
Not a whole lot to report, except that I've gotten a lot of emails asking about the update to the Mystic Education Center and how it's so far back usually, but they're glad to see it up in front with the agenda. Additionally, I was at the Republicans convention for the 40th district for nominations. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. I attended a gathering on Sunday at the church outside of Branford Manor in Groton on the city side with folks that have been expressing concerns with mold issues, repairs that are going unfixed, and many other issues concerning the residents in that area. It was definitely eye-opening, and I encourage if any other residents have concerns to reach out. I do think that this is something that should be addressed, and it definitely takes a lot for folks to want to speak up about what they're experiencing in that area. Also tonight, the Mystic Music Booster Club is having a fundraiser at the Fisherman down by Groton Long Point from 5 to 9. They have basket raffles, and part of the proceeds of any purchase from there goes to the Mystic Boosters. So that's what I have as of right now. Several emails and concerns asking for updates on the Mystic Oral School, as well as data center updates with GodSpace. Since their April 7th was their date of to make some moves and other just contacts. I also attend some RTM budget meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I too attended the Recovery Fest with Councilors Kasiri, Jones, Councilor Franco, Councilor Baumgartner. We're all in attendance. Just want to thank Dave Ogden, who's an educator at Grosso Tech, who sort of was instrumental in putting the whole event together. I was just very fortunate to meet the group of students who led the effort, and I just got to say they were very impressive, very inspiring, and sort of with my conversation, they just wanted to express the urgency of the matter, and they didn't think they could wait. So they put on an event in a couple months, but right before the year ended, and they hope that it becomes an annual thing, and I'm sure it will. And looking forward to what they can do when they have a full year to prepare. Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too have had a very busy last couple of weeks. I attended Representative Joe Courtney's nominating convention for Congress. I accepted the 41st District Democratic nomination for the 41st District Convention. I also attended Recovery Fest along with Councilor Franco, Mayor Melendez, Councilor Kasiri, Councilor Jones, and just want to thank the organizers, in particular Tammy and Joe Dela Cruz, who are part of the organizing efforts as well. I attended the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in the city earlier this week. Also held a second Complete Streets meeting. We had 2 meetings now of very substantive discussions, and again want to thank in particular Public Works Director Hanover, as well as Town Planner Deb Jones, and Parks and Rec Director Mark Berry for participating as well. And their expertise has been valued and appreciated by the entire committee. Also received correspondence from Representative Chris Conley regarding state bond funding for the city seawall. I believe it's to the tune of about $2.7 million. Will certainly provide enormous budgetary pressures, or remove budgetary pressures on our council to provide funding, whether it's through ARPA or direct funding through our capital reserve fund, to take the burden off the taxpayers, and for obviously a very important infrastructure project that it will improve our coastal resilience. So I want to thank Representative Conley, Representative Dela Cruz, and Senator Summers on their advocacy efforts, and certainly our governor as he chairs the commission. Also, as Councilor Portolan mentioned, held a meeting on Sunday at St. John's Church to discuss with the tenants some of the issues that Brantford Manor residents have been having with respect to mold and some other health issues. On Friday, I invited Senator Richard Blumenthal to come down to check out some of the conditions and speak with the residents, and it's been a very eye-opening experience. Many of these issues have been going on for years, and it's about time that there's some action and support for our Brantford Manor families. So please stay tuned on that, and obviously would implore any individual who is living in Brantford Manor who is experiencing mold problems or dealing with other health issues as a result of their living standards there, to reach out to the Ledge Light Health District and submit a complaint to their office. I think with that, there's nothing else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Franco.
One more. I apologize. Sorry for Councilor Franco, if you'll allow me to indulge. Did receive a correspondence from a few people regarding short-term rentals, imploring our council to take action on the item in the very near future. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Franco.
Thank you. I had numerous communications with residents. Beautification is doing a Clean Up Your Act that are 3 Saturdays in May, hoping that residents will go out and clean up their streets, their neighborhoods, streets near their neighborhoods, businesses in their parking lots, etc. And I, as noted, attended the Recovery Fest, attended the Beautification Special Meeting. Also worked on Indian Field Road beautification project where we put down some patio walking stones, we planted more flowers, and some neighbors are purchasing flagpoles, and the town will install them. And I put Director Hanover's mind at ease that the neighbors said that they will take care of the flag, raising it and lowering it at half-mast. And they're very proud of this. They're very excited to have this up there. I went out with Kathy Chase, an RTM representative, this weekend, and we reviewed some town properties. And there were some issues that I brought to the town manager's attention, such as there was a driveway issue up at the middle school. There's something going on with the pavement, but Mr. Burt had taken that and is bringing it to Mr. Hanover's attention, and going to check into that because it could still be under warranty and such. Some landscaping questions. I also checked out the seawall down in the city, and I don't know if anybody's gone down and checked it, but it is, from my perspective of looking at it, it is definitely bulk, like it's like pushing out from the wall, and you can definitely see that there's a serious issue there. Watch some RTM budget meetings, and just to notate, my husband is now the president of the Groton Little League, and I've been hearing some great feedback that the town and the city are working to do improvements and maintenance on the fields, and it was really nice to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll note that Counselor Parker joined us at 6:44. Counselor Parker, your calendar and communications.
I received several emails, different topics. I believe most of the councilors probably already spoke about it. And I just came from the TVCCA meeting. Talked about the Energy Assistance Program, the Little Learners Program. They received some good news from the state legislator about money for schooling for early childhood development. And they talked about My Home CT, which is a program for homeowners to assist with their mortgage payments if they're going into foreclosure. Hopefully I'll have some information to pass out and get a flyer out. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Deb Monahan will be leaving TVCCA. She has put in 49 years, and I want to thank her for all her hard work and being part of the community. And she will be greatly missed. So I just wanted to make sure get a shout out to her for that. And I guess there's some news coming up about the Groton sites that I have to get more information from Deb and Mr. Burt on to confirm that. It looks like a lot of things are getting into place because those buildings were built, the modulars were built in 1990. So they're due to be updated. So that's all I have.
Thank you. On to approval of minutes, can be found on page 2. Make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole special meeting minutes of May 3rd, 2022, and the meeting minutes of May 10th, 2022. So moved.
Second, Franco.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Franco. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously, 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. On to new business. 5A, Colonel Ledyard School Property Short-Term Tax Agreement, page 11. I make a motion to recommend a resolution to approve the short-term fixed assessment agreement with Bellsite Development LLC. So moved.
Second, Kasiri.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Kasiri, and we have Director Reiner and Mr. Bronk here for some background. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, John Reiner. Got to speak a little closer. So tonight, we just want to give a brief overview. So the council has seen us numerous times working towards the redevelopment of the Colonel Ledyard property. Within the purchase and sales agreement for that property, it was stated in that option agreement that the town and the developer would use good faith efforts to negotiate a short-term fixed assessment agreement, sorry, that's a mouthful, for a period of time. And what we've done with one other project similar to this, the Sealy School, we entered into a short-term tax agreement with the developers of that property that was for a period not to exceed 1 year, or when a certificate of occupancy was issued, whichever came first. And the fixed assessment was on the improvements that were made by the developer after the issuance of a building permit. So this is something that developer had asked us to assist in some of the cost while the project is under construction. So this is normally when a project is being constructed, the assessor will go out and do inspections as they get through a certain point in that construction process. The developer, once they purchase the property, would still pay taxes on the land for the property, but not the improvements associated with the construction for the first year or until the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. We get requests for much longer and much bigger tax incentives, but we think that this is a modest incentive for the developer, and it assists with during the construction process. Pretty straightforward. Happy to answer any background questions, history on this, or anything else.
Thank you. Councilor Kasiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do they have a time frame of when it is supposed to be done?
So if the council approves this fixed assessment agreement, they will then be formally applying for inland wetlands and Planning and Zoning Commission, both before the city. Not exactly sure how long those will take. It could be 4 to 6 months. They then have to put their construction plans together. Thinking about it along that timeline, maybe we'll see construction start sometime this winter or early next spring. Because they'll be rehabbing the existing building out there, it's not necessarily pouring all new foundations and things along those lines.
Okay.
But I think that's probably my best guess. I don't know if you.
Thank you. I just wanted to see if the year was going to basically be the same. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. So it's going to be 1 year post the, from the year from the time the building permit is issued? If that's what you're stating as in this?
Correct.
And when do we think that will be issued?
So the question that was just asked, so approximately they will go through inland wetlands and planning and zoning before the city. That could take 6 months,
6 months,
could take 4 months. They then generally have to work on architectural plans and get those ready for building permit.
So then they're paying tax on the land and just not the buildings, as it states?
That's what will happen during that period of time. Or not on construction, not on the improvements.
And do we know roughly what the taxes would be on the land?
Nope, those would be determined by the tax assessor. So right now, there is an assessed value on the land, but the property has not paid taxes anytime in the foreseeable past. So I think once an approval is in place, the tax assessor would probably relook at those numbers and make sure things are brought up.
Yeah, because I think that's an important piece to know, like, if we're talking like that they're gonna be, responsible for the taxes of the land, some good information would be to know ballpark where it stands now, so that we can see what the difference is when it's reassessed, and have that come before us as well. So we have new information on where, because I tried to look up some of it myself. We don't know what it was assessed at its last assessment on the town page at all. As a
So
thought.
they don't pay any taxes on the property right now, because it's still owned by the town.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, there's still, it's owned land, so I was just curious as to what the assessed value of the land and projected what the taxes would be on that land. It just would be kind of another way. So can we, when that is done, can we get that information as to where it is now and when the next assessment is done, so we can see what those numbers are? Is that a fair request?
So when what is done?
So the assessment, right, so we, even though we own the land has a value.
Mhm.
So there would be a rough estimate of how much taxes would be paid on that if we didn't own it. Okay? And so I'm asking what that number would be, and then you said, well, eventually Deb and then we'll be reassessing it, just to make sure it's at the right amount. I'd like to just know what that, new amount would be.
So the current land value is approximately $342,000.
Mm-hmm. That's the land value, and then whatever our tax rate is for land, multiply that and.
The assessor will go back out though to see if that's still accurate numbers.
Okay, so could you just keep us up to date on those numbers is what I was asking. Thank you.
Council Franco?
So can you give a little explanation of how this is exactly gonna work? So, for the first year, they're gonna get basically this deal. So if after a year, because I mean, there's some things in here that maybe I just don't understand how the contract works, but, there's some other issues in relation to, fixed the assessment of real property taxes for a period not to exceed 10 years when improvements will be constructed. And there's also could potentially be different phases, is that correct? Can you sort of explain how it's all gonna work out with?
Sure, so
Different things.
Connecticut general laws allows municipalities to grant a tax, I think it's right on, the first page.
I'm looking at our packet, it's page 65.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Section E, if anybody wants to follow along.
Yeah, so that first page of the fixed assessment agreement, Connecticut general statute allows municipalities to fix real property taxes for a period not to exceed 10 years. We're not doing that, nor is that contemplated in this agreement. It's just stating that that's what Connecticut general laws allows. So in this instance, if the developer receives all of their approvals from the city, at some point in time after that, they would be purchasing and closing on the property. That would happen probably around the same time they're ready to pull a building or ready to apply for a building permit for the city. If they purchase the property, they'll be paying taxes on the land for the property. Once they pull that building permit, then the 1 year clock starts ticking for any improvements that they do. Once 1 year is over, and again, this agreement is only for phase 1 of the project, there's nothing contemplated for phase 2 of the project. At a 1 year period of time, or at the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, whichever time period is shorter, then after that, they pay the full boat on taxes.
Okay, so they only have this 1 year regardless of anything.
Correct.
Phases, what the general statute says, he's agreeing to this 1 year, and that's all we're offering it, basically.
Correct.
Is that correct? All right, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Council Baumgartner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm reading through the fixed tax assessment agreement now, and just a question, was in the option agreement. So under tax incentives for the original option purchase agreement, at the bottom it says the parties agree that the fixed assessment agreement must be approved and in place prior to any submission of land use applications, provided however such fixed tax agreement shall include without limitation a condition precedent requiring purchaser to satisfy all conditions precedent set forth in section 3 of this agreement and to purchase the property before the benefits set forth in said fixed tax agreement become effective.
What
And that-
page are you on? I'm sorry.
I'm on page 27.
Thank you.
And that was signed back in March of 2021. So we've satisfied those conditions set forth in section 3 of this agreement.
Yes.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Well, they have not yet purchased the property.
So when would that go into effect?
When will?
The purchasing of the property?
So again, the trigger on them purchasing the property will happen after, generally after they get all their land use approvals and prior to them submitting a building permit.
And
I'm guessing sometime in the next 6 months or so.
And so then, it wouldn't even be until then where the tax agreement would go into effect, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Counselor McBride?
Thank you. Just a question on the timing. If the timing goes past October 1st when things are reevaluated, how would that work if the 12-month period ends in, let's say, January 1st? Because usually the assessor wouldn't go out and revalue the buildings. Or are you going to, line it up so it ends October 1st?
So this agreement, they'll be paying taxes on the land, and if the assessment changes, I believe there's actually a section in here dealing with,
Page 66, under definitions, there, it talks about assessment year.
yeah, and the fixed assessment period, assessment year shall mean a 12-month period.
So the year will be that year in effect. In other words, we won't be signing this mid-year, so they can grab an extra 6 months of
No, it's 1 year, it's, 365 days, so it's not necessarily a July 1 to June 30th. It's from the time that they apply a building permit, the clock starts ticking.
Okay, I guess my question then is if the 1 year ends January 1st, and they have, I don't even know how large the project is, $1 million of project capitalized, does the assessor go out at that point and reestablish how much that value is worth?
Once the 1 year time period is over, then yes, the assessor will be keeping an eye on the project through the whole project, because she likes to see where things are, improvements that are being made, and how they're doing the construction of the project. So once either a CO is granted or that 1 year time period is up, a new value will be in place based on the construction, and a new value will be placed on the property based on those improvements.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering if it could be reviewed, or should it be considered in this document, because if the timing doesn't work, there's nothing stating that they're gonna have to pay that tax if it doesn't fall within the assessment year. Like usually the assessor won't go out, they don't go out and value anything unless it's for the grand list, right? Unless it's a CO. So if this project, if it's not completed within the year and they're half built, are we gonna get taxes on half of the work that's been completed?
We will, if, at a 1 year period of time, if they have not been granted a CO yet, whatever improvements they've made, it'll be viewed just as any other project. We will collect taxes on all of those improvements from that date moving forward.
Okay, and that's clear, it doesn't have to be spelled out, it's just a known.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question, I guess question or comment was, would it, and I don't know this, would it be safe to assume that if the purchase price is $41,000, is that what they're gonna argue they're gonna be paying taxes on? Just so we're, because I know you had a question on taxes, and if I'm flipping the hat on the other side, if I'm the developer, it's worth $340, but if I buy it for $41, I'm gonna make the argument that it's only worth $41. So, is that gonna be what they're gonna be paying taxes on? And I don't have an issue with it, I just wanna make sure we're all on the same page on if that will occur.
So, yes, section 2.4 on page 68 in your packet, no appeals. During the fixed assessment period, developer shall not apply to the town's Board of Assessment Appeals to seek any full or partial exemption. And they will not appeal the assessed values established by the town therein to any court.
So they can't change the 360 then, or whatever that number was?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Bordelon?
Thank you. That was where I was going, is just trying to understand to make sure that what number were they being taxed on, as far as the value. So if the 342 is the current, and you're saying there could be a possible reassessment at some point in the middle of this, is that correct?
The tax assessor will do her normal procedures of what she would normally do assessing property. Anytime a pending or building permits have been issued, she comes through our office, reviews all the plans, and they do periodic inspections of the properties while they're under construction, so that she understands what the value of the property is and how it's increasing over time. She will, I certainly don't want to put words in her mouth, or predict her actions, but I can't imagine that she would not continue to do those inspections throughout the project, just so that she has a solid understanding of where this project is for when they get the CO, or when that 1 year time period is up, and then at that point in time, a new assessed value would be given to the property.
Yeah, I'm more talking just about not the items on the property, just the land part that they'd be taxed on initially. That's just, I just want it, I mean, if you're saying that's strong enough on page 68 to state that that's exactly what will happen, and it's not gonna be a lower amount than that baseline of 342 as of right now, and it's not spelled out in the contract as such necessarily, but if it doesn't need to be, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear, and that we're covered.
Land values, just as building values can always change, I can't guarantee that the value is gonna stay at $342,000. It all based on the assessor and her working with her
Right.
protocols and appraisers, and I don't pretend to
Yeah. No, I'm not
be
saying
an
that
expert in that.
I'm not saying that it would, I'm just simply saying that they know currently where it's assessed,
Correct.
and they're aware of that, because it's not written in this contract anywhere. So
Correct.
like initially, like some other contracts I've seen, this is why I'm asking, I know that land fluctuates. It would state like current value, at the initial time was this, with the
And it is
fluctuating
in-
value.
And it is on our GIS, it says it when you click on their property for the tax
Yeah.
information.
It's just not in the contract anywhere,
Correct.
and I just was wondering if it should be spelled out a little bit cleaner in here.
Well, we don't want to pin down because it might go up.
Yes.
It
Right.
hasn't been looked at in a while.
So would it be worthwhile to have it in there and that a fluctuating value with the current value being as this, but with understanding that it would be, I've just seen it written different, and this is just kind of, it's not as clear as I just thought it could be is all. And everybody knows that property values fluctuate, but I think it should, I don't know, if you guys think it's solid, I just wanna ask the question. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, you're welcome. The town attorney assisted in the review and creation of this document, as did the town's tax assessor and the finance director.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Franco?
So during this time period, because it depends on when this happens, they're still gonna have to, from what I'm reading here, I'm on page 67, under tax matters, section 2.1. Nothing herein shall excuse the developer from filing a personal property declaration or annual income and expense reports. So whatever's on that property at that time, they're gonna have to declare it at that point, and they will be paying taxes on it. That's not excluded during this 1 year time frame, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then can you give me just like a little update here between the 2.1 and the 2.2 regarding the non-fixed and the fixed assessments?
So they will, in 2.1, they will still have to pay all taxes on personal property and/or sewer or water connection fees, so there's no waiver on any of those. Whereas in 2.2, that's spelling out that the fixed assessment agreement is on the improvements and buildings under construction, but not the land, in connection with only phase 1 of the project. So not with phase 2 or phase 2 construction.
Okay. And then there's the 2.3 regarding completed building and improvements, and as you stated, 2.4 where there's no appeals to these. And the assessor will be doing the proper assessments throughout the whole time period, hitting all the proper, to make sure that all of these are being fulfilled by the development, as she does most everybody else in the town, I'm sure.
Correct. Our tax assessor is very thorough.
All right, thank you. And there's, and there's no other incentives other than this? This is it? The 1 year shot, that's all you're getting?
From the town,
from the
correct.
town, correct? All right, thank you.
Counselor Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So anything that can be considered a type of tax break can be concerning to the taxpayers, so I just kind of want to go over this a little bit more. So Connecticut General Statutes allows a municipality to enter into an agreement to fix the assessments of real property taxes for a period not to exceed 10 years when improvements to be constructed are intended for a permanent residential use in connection with a residential property consisting of 4 or more dwelling units. So we're only entering into 1 year or certificate of occupancy. In your area of expertise, is a year fair and is it common?
So also in this instance, the developer will be paying taxes on the land. So in many instances, you see these fixed assessment agreements ranging with 3, 5, 7 to 10 years. We've been very strict on these. We think that there's a very strong housing market in Groton. There's strong demand, and we've been asked on many projects for fixed assessment agreements. This, in the almost 8 years that I've been here, this is only the second one we brought to the council, and the other one was also just like this for 1 year period of time. So this is about as small as they can get.
Great, and I appreciate you being strict and thinking of the taxpayers of Groton, so thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously, 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. Thank you. Okay, on to Mystic Education Center update.
Page 94.
Thank you. Page 94, and we have Attorney Callahan here for the update.
Good evening, Groton Town Council. As you know, that the dispute resolution process required by the dispute resolution process required by the development agreement between the Town of Groton and Restler Homes LLC has been triggered. We participated in the pre-mediation process, which proved unproductive, and the Town of Groton triggered the mediation process, which we're still involved with. The mediation rules require that the discussion during the mediation remain confidential. And, but I have been authorized by both Restler Homes LLC and Blue Lotus Group to confirm that Blue Lotus Group did participate in the mediation session that has occurred in this matter. And our next mediation session is scheduled actually for this Friday, May 27th. So we can't really discuss what's occurred during the mediation. There's been some stuff that's been exchanged outside of mediation that is essentially fair game, and I believe you're aware of that. That's a letter that's been sent by DECD, Commissioner Lehman, to Restler Homes LLC. That was on April 22nd, and on May 19th, Ressler Homes responded to the DECD letter and ultimately is requesting a meeting with the state, which I don't believe has been scheduled yet. And I can certainly discuss strategy in an executive session or try to answer any questions that doesn't infringe on the confidentiality agreement that you may have.
All right, Manager Burt, are you looking for some direction from the council today?
Yeah, excuse me. I had put in the agenda item on page 94 that we're looking for some, currently the current direction from the council is to be working towards getting out of the agreement. So one, do we continue those efforts? Do we continue mediation? Do we continue the same track under mediation? Are there any changes? So it's just to get guidance from the council on what you would like to do. And then if you do want to do mediation, do we continue to allow Blue Lotus to participate? And then if you do not want to continue mediation, we can talk from there about what options there are.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, I have a few questions just regarding the mediation. So, my understanding that Blue Lotus was in the room. My question is, who invited Blue Lotus into our mediation?
Ressler, I don't know if Ressler asked on their behalf if it could be, and that was brought up, we're not supposed to talk about executive session, but the council knew before it actually occurred, so.
The council knew about Blue Lotus being a party of the mediation and consenting to that?
And then this isn't the first time we talked out in public about it either, it's been mentioned before in public.
Well, I never agreed to allowing Blue Lotus into our mediation. Just want to state that on the record, even if it was a consensus, I've never once stated that was the case or supporting that. In large part because, again, they're being made parties to a mediation when even our own council can't be, a body that actually has to vote on agreements, binding legal documents on behalf of our residents and taxpayers. So, and in addition to that, it's my understanding that Commissioner David Lehman also expressed his discomfort with kind of how things were proceeding. And I know we had discussed that a little bit just now, but could we maybe give a little bit more information to the residents just about kind of what the what the consequences of that would be? Maybe consequences is too strong of a word.
First, just for a clarification point, Blue Lotus Group is not a party to the mediation. They, it's a distinction. They were involved with it, but they're not a party. So I would equate them more to, similar to how you'd invite maybe a witness into a mediation. They're not party to it.
So how do you get invited to the party?
Similar to, using a witness or something in that regard in a proceeding. They're not party to it. They, I believe we can exclude them if we want to in the next mediation session. And
Well, that would be my desire, and I don't want to say that in executive session. I'd rather say that in public for all to hear.
with respect to the letter from the state, it's dated April 22nd, 2022. It's from Commissioner Lehman to Jeffrey Ressler, who is the owner of Ressler Homes, LLC, the party to the development agreement. And essentially, it says that the state is operating based on limited details, and that it describes the process that the town and state went through in terms of the RFP process, and mentions the project that's described in the development agreement, and that there are certain state boards, like the State Properties Review Board, the Office of Policy and Management, and the Department of Administrative Services that, normally all weigh in on that process. And Commissioner Lehman says at this point, we are concerned those entities may not accept a new set of principles and a project not reviewed or vetted through the RFP process, and if approval is sought, when and if approval is sought. And then he goes on to say that a Public Act 15-193 requires DECD to solicit and review proposals from companies interested in purchasing state-owned or formerly state-owned properties placed on a priority list, and that Respler Holmes's proposal was reviewed and selected accordingly. So then he concludes that the interests and obligations of the state in this matter center on economic development and the return of otherwise derelict properties to productive use. We hope to see the Mystic Oral School property redeveloped in a way that benefits the residents of the town of Groton and the region. So he doesn't definitively say that Blue Lotus Group cannot purchase Jeffrey Respler's interests and kind of step into his shoes, so to speak, under the purchase agreement with the state. And, I'll leave it to the state to make its own decision in that regard, and it has an AG's office that can help guide them through that process. But what I glean from the letter is he doesn't definitively say yes or no. He just is expressing his viewpoint based on whatever the limited information that he received.
So through this mediation process, or the dispute resolution process, the two parties involved in that, one being the town, the other being Respler Homes, they have to come to an agreement. Now, should that agreement, assuming Blue Lotus is in that room, and that agreement is contingent on whatever Blue Lotus gets out of that agreement, or the exchange of the option, if you will, on the part of Respler to Blue Lotus. I guess my question / comment would be, should you take Blue Lotus out of the room, then, both, and you have Respler Homes and the town of Groton come to an agreement, and then the state comes around and says, well, this agreement that you have come to, we're not satisfied with it because whatever parameters that we set through the RFP process for developing the site have now gone by the wayside and doesn't meet our criteria. So I guess my question is, at what point do we have to also start engaging the state on some of these issues as well, because they do own the property and it's under the care of the state, in order to ensure that we can put this by the wayside and have a sustainable path forward.
Councilor's time has expired. The question can be answered.
So the state of Connecticut owns the property, and without the state's willingness to sell the property to Respler Homes, whether Blue Lotus Group steps into that role or not, that's really their prerogative. Just as background, and the letters that were traded back and forth are out there. We don't have to come to an agreement in mediation. What we've said in our letters is that that we believe Respler Homes is in default of the development agreement. They disagree. They claim that the town was supposed to do certain things under the development agreement that weren't performed. That's how this dispute resolution process was triggered. And in those default letters, we reserve the right to pursue all remedies, one of which would be termination of the development agreement. So, we do have to participate in good faith in the mediation process to try to resolve that dispute. If Blue Lotus is part of that, then I think any resolution would need to be contingent on the state approving that result and maybe keeping the mediation open until we receive that direction. But you know, thinking about that, I think if we came out of a mediation and said, here's what the result is, and the state understood whatever that result might be, and that it's contingent on them looking at it, that might guide the state in some respects on what the town is looking for. And the Blue Lotus Group, we knew about Blue Lotus Group, I believe it was January 25th of this year, that I received a letter from Gary O'Connor, the attorney for Respler Homes, saying that they were in the mix. You know, it would have been our expectation that they take the lead on making sure the state approved what was happening, or whatever it was they were proposing. We were just receiving the information.
And I know my time is expiring,
yeah.
but he represents both parties, both Respler and Blue Lotus, correct?
My understanding is he represents Respler Homes, but he's tried to help facilitate some of the stuff between the two, but that in negotiating the purchase agreement.
Blue Lotus's website lists him as their attorney.
I realize that it does, but in speaking with Mr. O'Connor, he's given us the ability to speak with Blue Lotus Group directly. And my understanding is when they negotiated the agreement between them, Blue Lotus Group had a different attorney involved.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Franco?
So my question is, there are some things that we can discuss here, and then there's some things we have to discuss in executive session. And what was that? So my question is, we cannot vote in executive session. We can all verbally tell you what our thoughts are and what direction we think you should go. And then how do you, I just would like you to publicly tell people, like, how do you leave executive session with 9 different people that aren't voting on a matter? How do you leave with some kind of understanding of which direction to go? Because then we don't come out of executive session and tell everybody what we're doing, because there's negotiation and there's strategy involved here. So can you explain that?
Sure. I think if you go into executive session, it would allow us to discuss the pending claims or pending litigation, and you can reach a consensus and provide us direction on, you know, how you want us to proceed.
And just to mention, when we come out of those executive sessions, we try to get a little synopsis. When we receive direction that to eventually get out of the agreement, that was said in public when we came out of the executive session.
I think sort of what I'm questioning is, there's 9 of us, we can't vote. If I tell you, like, I've told you my opinions, I have spoken very freely in executive session. Other people I know haven't said anything, and then there's other people that may have opposed, like, have opinions of my own. How do you come out with the direction to go in?
Usually, we try to make sure we understand where people are at, and sometimes the mayor will ask, you know, are we satisfied? Is there any more questions? And we always say what the direction. So our understanding is the direction is this. That's what we usually say at the end of those executive sessions.
All right, because I just know that sometimes some counselors feel like they didn't agree to something, but the consensus was that, but we can't discuss this outside of executive session, what happened in executive session. So sometimes it's sort of like, I just want you to clearly let the public know what's happening and like how things are decided, and given direction to you and how you perceive things. Thank you.
Sure, and part of that too, if I could also just comment, is depending on what's discussed in executive session, you know, the strategy is not always, we want to publicly say, here's what the strategy is, because we're going into a proceeding where, you know, we don't necessarily want to give the other side our game plan. So during those executive sessions, I could always help guide you on how to come out of it and say what you want to say without revealing our strategy or our game plan.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I too agree with Councilor Baumgartner. You know, there was never a consensus or anything really brought to us directly that, you know, we were going to involve Blue Lotus into this capacity. in regards to what was just stated about the consensus, again, it's a consensus of 9, doesn't mean that everybody in executive session agreed to it. A consensus is, you have to have 5 to move forward with an idea. So that doesn't, a consensus doesn't mean all 9 counselors agreed, and this is where this is troublesome with our process. There's gotta be another way to, I mean, there's been many executive sessions that, people have been in and come out and, it's not the direction that maybe they wanted it to go, and it's gone forward. I do think, that there should be a process that's way more transparent than what we're doing, but coming out of executive session and having some form of vote then, of some sort, that's just me. I do have concerns about Blue Lotus. I think they rose up really quick. How long has Blue Lotus been in creation?
I think, I recall looking at it in the
Yeah.
past, but I think it's a very new entity. It was created
Right,
probably around the time that they negotiated this agreement with Respler Homes.
Correct. Yeah, so to me, it just screams just not transparent, in my opinion. I speak for myself, in the sense that it's just quickly rose up, and the fact that they're being invited to the mediation, and counselors here that, had the consensus or thoughts on direction have no voice in any of that. I think moving forward, we need to go back out to look for the pervert developer. And honestly, in my opinion, I think they should automatically be excluded because they've been a part of the mediation process with the current developer. I think that, we've seen this a lot with other developments in our town too, the switching of hands and then someone else. And I think we have to caution and kind of roll back a little bit. I am concerned with that. The letter that you read, there's a lot of things here unanswered, and if they're using the same attorney, there's a lot of things here. So again, I ask that we slow down, do it right, assess, and this property's been sitting for a long time, and I think it should be developed into something that would suit that community and that area of the town and the town at large. But I do not think this is a rush deal process with a short-term company that rose off and is now in the mediation with Respler. That's a little concerning to me. Could you speak to that? I mean, wouldn't that, kind of eliminate a developer in some aspects? That's part of a mediation of an agreement that we're trying to get out of, per se. I don't know how you can proceed with someone in the future.
I would just mention that's a state process, so it would go under their rules for how they follow.
Right.
It's state rules on the RFP process generally. If they, they have certain regulations, so they might have a regulation that would not allow, and they might have no issue on it.
And as far as the land goes, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, as far as the land goes, that's the state's, but these agreements that we made with the Pratt building and all of that, that's definitely a town issue and should not be transferable in any capacity. So those are the other concerns. So there's a lot of layers here. We're not just talking about the land with the state. We're talking about, the whole agreement and what capacity is Blue Lotus trying to take over this agreement. Also the dual use with the Pratt building, or, I do think we have so much here to look at, and we need to take our time with it. And I think our executive sessions should be productive in the sense where we're allowed to speak more than twice. That's another concern, is that
Counselor's time has expired. Thank you.
we can't properly, so I think when we have, I'll finish my thing. I think when we have executive sessions on hot items like this, counselors should not be limited to time and discussion
Thank you.
for due diligence.
Counselor Westervelt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with some of my fellow counselors that I at no point remember ever being asked to have Blue Lotus in the mediation. Matter of fact, I think my reaction the day you told us that we invited them, I'm like, who? Because I didn't. The thing is, when we talk about consensus votes or consensus in executive session, a consensus is a vote. We can't do that. If we're going to do that, we need to come out of executive session and make a vote for what we're going to do. Very simple. We agree to continue the mediation, we have a vote, and it's public, everybody knows we're going to do that. We're going to allow someone like Blue Lotus into the room, then we publicly state we're going to allow that. We don't let it hide behind anybody's, we don't let it hide behind the curtain. So I don't believe that the way we did that process, that it was correct. Now, I may be wrong at the saying consensus is not a vote, but if you got 9 people and you're looking for a consensus and 5 people say, yes, I'll do it, and 4 people say no, that's a vote. So I just don't think we did that process properly. As far as Blue Lotus goes in the mediation, they have no legal standing whatsoever with the town. They shouldn't be in there, and by allowing them in there, the confidentiality rules of the mediation are shot because you've got somebody who should not be there. So I'm very concerned that we've allowed the confidentiality to be stretched beyond what is reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. I just gotta, I remember very distinctly going into executive session and having a discussion about Blue Lotus. Manager Burke, could you?
What I would say, though, is I don't know if there was, what it may have been, though, is a discussion, and they made the request, is there any issue with it? So I can't say there was any kind of, I don't want to say vote, it's not a vote, but all I can say is it was discussed and known in direction was it was okay. So,
Yeah,
because we were all very much, we were not going to, we would not make that decision without talking to the council.
Right, and I also remember coming out of executive session and a comment being made publicly about, like, an overview. If there's any way
That
you...
was the second executive session that we did the public comment, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on.
Okay. I remember distinctly when the Blue Lotus thing came about. I remember having an executive session about it, and I remember that being the direction. If you could somehow find that meeting and send that to the council so it can refresh their memories on when that was.
That wouldn't be the executive session.
No. There was a comment after it coming out. So if you could find that and send that to the council, that would be very helpful. Councilor Franco?
I don't understand. I'm hearing some counselors that are saying that they would like to have a vote after we come out of executive session on some of these things. And that's basically like, how about we just tell the opposing party how we're going to go on, like how we're going to proceed. It's like you're showing your whole hand in a negotiation setting, and you don't show your hand in a negotiation, or how you're going to strategize to get to an end result sometimes. There are things that you're in executive session, they have to take what you say in executive session. And I completely remember this conversation about Blue Lotus. I concur with Mayor Melendez. I do remember some people not saying a word in executive session about any of it. And I remember the town manager specifically asking us what we thought about it. What did we think about them going into it? And he said it was up to us. And the comments made by counselors in that executive session led him to move forward. That's why I'm asking these questions. Where did they get the ideas? I mean, if you sit through an executive session and you don't say anything, then you're not putting a comment out there. But if he gets enough people to say, yes, go forward with this, that's where he goes. He goes forward with this. And if people remain quiet or silent and don't say anything, then that's not on them to know what you're thinking. I mean, you have to speak up and tell people what you think. Because I specifically and very clearly remember that executive session. And I don't think coming out of executive session and saying, all right, we're going to vote on these 3 things, and then we're going to let Ressler know which way we're going, and so he can plan before his next meeting so he can have the jump on us. It's not what you do. You just don't do that. And I also think there's a lot more we have to discuss in executive session that has to do with like potential future litigation. And what is the right route to go? I mean, what are the recourses of all of these things, and how is that going to affect the town and the taxpayers and dollars in the town? So I'm just very surprised when I hear people say, well, I didn't do this. I can specifically remember it. I don't know how you can say you weren't part of the meeting, and you don't even remember the question being asked. It's shocking to me that if you don't remember the question being asked in executive session, there's problems. And And the sad thing is, it's not on camera, and it's not recorded, and you can't go really back to it, so. I don't know, I don't know if you have to take like notes as to exactly what happens, because we're not even supposed to take notes in executive session. I don't know how to solve this, but I'm very surprised at some of the conversations I'm hearing tonight. So I would personally just like to go into executive session and be able to ask the questions I have regarding this situation so we can make up a decision. Thank you.
Was that a motion?
Should I read the motion, actually?
Is there going to be a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, yeah, you can read the motion.
I move that the members of the Town Council Committee of the Whole, Town Manager John Burr, Planning Director John Reiner, Economic Development Manager Paige Bronk, Attorney Eric Callahan, and Attorney Rich Cody. Shall I strike that? I'm striking Attorney Rich Cody. Go into executive session pursuant to General Statute, Section 1, 206B, for the purpose of discussing strategy and negotiations related to the pending claims involving the development and agreement between the Town of Groton and the Rustler Homes. I so move.
Second, Kasiri.
Moved by Franco, seconded by McBride. Counselor Bordelon?
I'd like to discuss that motion. I had my hand up prior, and regarding that motion, it was stated before, Blue Lotus was discussed, since we're going to talk about it. Yeah, you had drawings and everything. What was not, in my opinion, was some consensus. But again, if there was a consensus, it was only five people out of the nine.
So we're really
So it doesn't
just,
mean
we're really, no, because
It
we're just
doesn't mean
discussing
that
whether
all
we're going
nine
into
of the
executive session.
counselors agreed
Counselor
to that
Bordelon,
direction.
you're out of order.
That's fine.
We're discussing just whether
Sure.
we're going into executive session or not.
So I think rushing into executive session and not let us talk about the items at hand is not appropriate, and the things that were said. So I would still think we should discuss in front of the community some of the items. And no, it's not amnesia that people forgot. A consensus only means 5 people agreed for that direction. It doesn't mean 9. So I agree that we should stay outside first and talk about these issues. And it is frustrating that, I guess I had a question really quick to the attorney. I did look up this concern with other towns, and some of them come out of executive session and will call it 1A, Respler, 1B, Respler land. So it's not defined as to what we're doing. They actually call it something different, like we did when we were talking about Wolfbrook property, and we had a different name for it initially, and then all of that. Is there a way that we can do that that way we can vote when we come out?
I'm not really sure what you're referring to from other towns.
So, for example, the supposed consensus to include Lotus into the mediation, okay? That's a consensus, so it doesn't mean all 9 people agreed to that. It only takes 5 to move that. So is there a way that we could have come out of executive session and you just call it something different, call it B, call it A, call it something, and take your vote on that direction item that was discussed in executive session? Public doesn't know what we're voting on, but the vote is out there. So later, as you guys state, you could then track those votes that people are so concerned about. And that would disclose nothing publicly, because no one knows what 1A is attached to, or 1B, or 2C. You can call it anything. You can call it Ghost. You can call it Respler redevelopment. I mean, you can call it Lotus.
Point of information?
So is that possible to do from the attorney's opinion?
How would you know later what it was referring to?
Because you guys know exactly what we're discussing in executive session. The attorney's tracking it.
We might not know the order of what was going to be voted. I mean, I think it'd be hard to know later what
I
exactly
mean, you
happened.
could. It's done.
And any
It's-
notes would be foiable, too.
It is done, and I just think there's a way if people are concerned about a number, but in executive session, it can be a consensus, and it doesn't mean that all 9 counselors agreed to that direction, and that is a concern. It can take 5 people to say, yep, include them in the mediation. It doesn't mean the other 4 were on board. So to say the council's direction and the consensus of the council, it needs to be clear that the consensus is merely only 5. To be clear. Thank you.
Can I have a point of
think that-
information?
I think generally it's understood that anything that the council, in all of our votes, 5 gets you past the post. Nothing has to be unanimous in any anything we vote on ever. And I think people, the general public understands that.
Thank you for that.
Point of information?
Counselor Bartolon said she had looked up what she had just described. Can she tell me where that is, I can reference that?
I don't have it on me now, but I will, if you'd like, I can get it to you.
Thank you.
Just use different names.
Thank you. Council Westphal,
If she would like me to finish answering her or no?
you don't have it with you right now? You get it to her
But I would
later?
like to.
Council Westphal, you have the floor.
Okay, no problem.
I just want to be clear that I was not trying to say, let's go into executive session, lay our cards out on the table, then come out and show them to everybody else. I'm saying we come out and we agreed to go into mediation, which I remember agreeing to go into mediation, and that would have been the vote, and that would have been that would have been a public vote, knowing who wanted to go into mediation and who didn't, and it wouldn't be giving away any strategy, any of our talk in executive session. It just would have made it clear to the taxpayers of Groton who was in favor of it and who wasn't. Thank you.
And I think Eric or whatever attorneys there, whatever issue it is, could guide us on which things we could vote on without, any kind of negative issue with it out in public.
Okay. Council Bordelon.
Um,
And remember, this is about whether we're
Yes,
going
it
into
is.
executive session or not.
Yes, it is in regards. And to Counselor Franco's point about the, I guess my question to the attorney, in other situations that aren't with the town, attorneys don't have to disclose, they can name it something, and it's referencing something else. They do that in legal cases that, that are not open, that are fully unsealed. So is it possible? I mean, I'm just trying to think of a way, that's what I'm trying to do. There's gotta be a way that we could kind of come out and like, I think, Counselor Westervelt stated, agreeing to mediation or not. Like, that's pretty generic, like, it's not really showing a hand. So is there any other way we can kind of move in that direction?
I'd have to look specifically at what you're referring to, so when you send that to the council, I'd like to look at it as well. I think generally, a different way of doing it would be to come out of executive session and saying a consensus of X number, if that's what you're trying to accomplish was reached.
I don't know.
And then it would signify that not all of you reached that consensus, but at least 5.
Yeah,
Typically, when the other scenario you've been describing, usually you understand what it is that was the topic being voted upon, and here's what the vote was. So having this like coded system where no one can really follow it, I'm not sure what that really reveals.
they do it on land, like purchase of land to the public, so people don't know, right? You call it a different name, so that, other people don't know that we're bidding on that particular land. So property, they call it different things. I've seen just property names changed that reference the original property. That's all I was asking. I mean, have you seen that done with property before?
I'd have to go look at what you're referring to.
I will say after executive session, we've had some instances in Cow where there's been like motion to do whatever was discussed in Cow. But then by the time you do a resolution, you have to put the information in, so that the public has it by the time you do that step.
So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But again, I'm open to whatever, but it's I think that maybe we should change our wording, that the direction of the council, that's like sounding like everyone. It's, a direction of a few, and it should be stated as such.
Majority.
So,
Thank you.
And sometimes before we come out of executive session, it's discussed, what do we want to say when we come out? I think if we, discuss it, that's, hey, here's what we want to do, and kind of get some guidance and figure it out from there.
thanks for explaining.
Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing no other hands. So now we're going to vote on whether or not we're going into executive session. And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Council Parker, how do you vote?
Executive,
You vote in favor?
in favor.
Okay. So I have Parker, Kasiri, McBride, and Franco in favor. I have Westervelt, Baumgardner, Bordelon, Melendez opposed. That fails. 4 in favor, 4 opposed, 0 abstaining. So we're back to just discussing whatever we can discuss in open session. We're in the middle of our second round of speaking.
Do we want to maybe address, the first question on there of whether you want us to continue with mediation? Though I think Eric will want to weigh in on that some, but maybe if we take the questions, along the way.
Okay. So if counselors would express their preferences to, does the town council want to continue mediation efforts?
Point of information?
You want maybe Eric give a little bit of,
I'm just a little confused. Are we saying with Lotus or Russ?
that'll be
Yeah,
another
yeah.
question.
Okay, I'm a little lost.
Right now, it's just talk about Rustler.
Russ.
Correct.
Thank you.
Attorney Callahan?
Sure, so under the development agreement, there is a contractual dispute resolution process. And, the town has an obligation under the contract to participate in the mediation. And I think you have to see that process through first. You can't prematurely just elect to terminate that process because there's a contractual duty to participate.
Is there a way to shorten it or keep it from just dragging on?
It's somewhat at the, it depends on how it unfolds. So, generally during a mediation, parties can come to an agreement that can happen quickly, or it may not happen at all. And then the mediator will, who has some control over the process may say, I think we're getting close on these issues, or I want to spend more time on these issues, and I'm going to schedule another session. Or he can make recommendations and say, here's what I recommend. It's not binding, and you can choose to follow them or not. But he'll have some say on whether the process is concluded, or whether he wants to continue it. And I think if he wants to continue it, we have a duty to try to see it through under the contract.
Okay, so just in your professional opinion, you think that the council should continue mediation efforts?
Yes, and there's one scheduled for Friday, and, we'll be in a better position then to let you know what the next step is.
Okay. Councilor Franco?
So if we were in executive session, would there be more information you'd be able to tell us?
We can have a better strategy session on what to do during mediation and the potential outcomes.
So we're going to get a lot less information this way. And so we'll have less information to make a very wise decision. And then the mediation, if we just halted mediation, what's the potential liability on the town?
Well, I don't want to put the town in a unfortunate position. There's a contract, and the contract has to be followed in terms of dispute resolution.
So I sort of feel like you're being very careful with what you're saying, and that probably in executive session, there would probably be more to what he would be saying. So I find this whole situation that we're dealing with unprecedented from what the council has ever done, where the attorney comes to us and says we need to go into executive session for negotiation and strategy. And we are here to protect the taxpayers and our town against litigation. And we're not even getting all the information. And then we're gonna make decisions here. I find this just like shocking, just absolutely shocking that this is the situation that's going on here. I understand transparency. During this whole Mystic Education Center thing, how things have played out publicly when things should have been done in a proper procedure way, and it wasn't with some counselors. It's just been absolutely shocking. And now we're doing this, and I don't even know how to deal with this. How do I make a good decision if I'm not getting all the information because the attorney doesn't want to talk to us publicly, because there's things he can't say publicly. I just don't get what you're doing, or why you're doing what you're doing.
Councilor Franco, can you answer the 3 questions for the manager?
Excuse me?
Can you answer the 3
I
questions
don't
for
know,
the manager?
because I'm not getting all the information I need to from the town attorney.
So the council voted to not go into executive session, so the manager's looking for
I don't know
direction.
if I'm going to answer at all.
Okay.
I may have to abstain. I don't know what my answers are right now, because
All right.
we haven't had a discussion, and we're not going to get all the answers right now
Okay, thank
to
you.
make a decision.
Council Bordelon?
It's not precluding us, it's not stating that we can't go into the executive session. What we're doing right now is trying to have as much information, even that discussion we just started, above board, on camera, for the community to hear. At any point, we can still go into executive session.
No, we've already voted it down.
Point of
It's
order.
dilatory.
Councilor Franco?
Point of order.
Councilor Bordelon has the floor.
Thank you. Excuse me?
Councilor Franco?
I said because you don't know the rules.
Councilor Franco, you're out of order.
Point of order.
Councilor Bordelon, you have the
The
floor.
quorum, please.
Councilor Bordelon, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I think what we're doing here is allowing some discussion about some of the things that we could talk about, but at any point, we could still go into executive session. But I think the majority of the information that we could speak about open with the attorney for the community is fair and transparent. You know, I'm not even going to go down the loophole where with the personal, how some counselors acted. I mean, that should have been point of order, but I wasn't going to go there.
Councilor Bordelon?
I'm still
we're-
going.
This
To
round-
the attorney, is
Councilor
there?
Bordelon,
is
Councilor
there-
Bordelon.
I have a right to
This-
speak. I'm
this-
asking the attorney about these questions.
Councilor Bordelon, this is just about giving direction to the town managers. Question 1, 2, 3, we've had 2 rounds of discussion on this thing. We're really just asking
Thank you, Mayor.
councilors.
Other counselors went
answers
off
to
on a
their
full
question.
discussion, and it was never stopped. So I do appreciate you holding me to that restraints, and I ask that you treat everybody else the same. To the attorney about these items, there's stuff that we can talk about here in regards to those, and then the rest could be discussed in executive session. Is that correct?
You can discuss in open session stuff that was not part of the mediation discussions, but separate and apart from the confidentiality restrictions regarding the mediation, there's also exemptions from FOIA where we can go into executive session to discuss strategy and negotiations about how we want to proceed and the potential outcomes, which is inadvisable to discuss in open session.
Right. So I think it'd be important to discuss what we can now, and then the extra pieces that you can't add, we can add in executive session. But I think some of the things that you discussed already was more than the public would have got if we had voted to go directly into executive session. So having those parts picked out, I think is great, and then we can add a little bit of the rest of it in executive session. But I think what we can discuss here is important for the community. And I do understand, you know, what you're stating. But it seems as if there's a bit of amnesia once we come out of executive session of what's been said and what hasn't been said. So I just was hoping that we could kind of have a direction here, tease out what we can speak to regarding these 3 pointed areas, and anything that's like sensitive, then we can go in executive session for. So the 3 areas that I've asked that we should continue to talk about them openly, and I would support to go in executive session for the remaining caveat to that. But then if that's the case, the vote on the 3 items, we could vote outside of executive session minus those fine details that we talked about in executive session. Would that be fair? The sensitive stuff that you can't say here, you can say it in executive and we can come out and vote just like we're starting to do right now.
Unless you're explicitly like voting on a strategy or
Correct.
something.
Right. So
Yeah, and there may be, with respect to the 3 questions, there would be stuff in executive session I'd want to discuss with you before you voted on some of those items.
So would it be appropriate then to, you know, discuss openly here, go into executive session for the fine details that are the finer things that we can't go out with, and come back out and we can vote the same items that are in the agenda packet without the details added?
Now that it's failed though, it's not really an option, is it?
It would be no different. And that's what I was talking about the coding. It's not necessarily coding, it's limited wording for a vote outside of executive session, just like we're doing right now. We're starting to do that, and we were gonna vote. So, that's the example I was, coming forward with.
And just to weigh in, I do agree with her on the general process of teasing out what we can and eventually going
Thank
into
you.
executive session on things we can't, and then come back out and state what we can, or vote on what we can.
Thank you, I would encourage
But I'm not
councilors.
sure we could do that tonight now that the vote's failed, though.
We can still vote to go back in executive session once we're done teasing it out, can't we? There's nothing saying there's a one-day vote,
It just failed.
but if we.
Okay, hold
Just
on. If I have reason to believe that the outcome of the vote will change, then it's not a frivolous motion.
No.
That's the end of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Parker,
Was my time up?
yes.
Point of order.
Thank you.
What's your point of order?
We cannot go back and redo this vote. You can't go back and do it. It's tied,
Okay.
it's dead.
Thank
So we
you.
cannot, because it's 4-4-0. Thank you.
Counselor Parker?
So we won't be able to do it. Can I finish?
Yes.
We cannot go back and do executive session to discuss. So all we can do right now is hear what they have to say about the items they can talk about, and we won't be able to say nay or yay. So I feel like I needed more information. If he had to talk to us behind the scenes to give us the information, that would have been better. But since we cannot redo this vote, because it would be the same motion, I feel like I can't give guidance. Thank you.
Okay, so someone from the prevailing side could make a motion to reconsider if they wish to do so, and that can happen. Okay.
Point of in-
Mr. Mayor?
Point of
Yes.
information?
Wait a minute.
Counselor Parker?
Sir, we just did a vote. Who's the prevailing side? Because it's tie vote.
No, the vote no was the prevailing side because it failed. Those that voted nay to go into executive session were on the prevailing side.
Point of information?
It's a
What's your-
tie vote.
To have the same motion come up
It's
twice in the same.
Excuse me, Mayor.
No,
Topic
there- okay.
is dilatory.
Excuse me, Mayor, I had asked my point of
It's still
information
Someone
after
can
Parker.
make a motion to reconsider in the same meeting. Counselor McBride, you have the floor.
I was gonna comment after Counselor Franco that I was surprised we were heading this direction, but I was kind of heading towards what you were saying there. Could we consider some discussion with the attorney's advice on what we could discuss and what we shouldn't discuss, and then go into executive session? So I'm not gonna repeat what's already been said, but I am very surprised, because I myself need much more information on this matter. Thanks.
Okay. Counselor Westervelt?
Thank you. For the attorney, I've got just a couple of questions. How many actual mediation sessions have we had?
We had one larger session, and that was at the beginning of March. And then we had just a very brief session, which was really just a recommendation. I can't really discuss it, but we had a second one.
And how many sessions have been postponed or delayed?
Just a couple.
And are there any reasons, written reasons why those delays happened?
There's-
Were they on our side, or were the wrestler?
Once was a mediator himself.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
This-
Yeah, the last one was the mediator.
Okay.
We had a session scheduled for May 20th, and he had some unexpected conflict. And now it's scheduled for May 27th.
Okay.
The previous ones, there was one on first one was May 3rd, the second one was scheduled for March 3rd and March 4th. The March 4th one was postponed, so we can update you after the first one, the town council. And then I'd have to look at the history. There was a March 14th session, and then I want to say there was one at the beginning of April that resulted in the one scheduled for May 20th, which I think was the next time the mediator was really available. And then that one has been rescheduled to this Friday.
Okay. With
I don't
the-
think there's anything in like a written document that the mediator has prepared that says the reasoning or any of that.
Okay, I'm just curious so that, because we've heard mediation many times, but we've
Yeah.
never really heard anything about it. So that just gives me a better idea of what's going on. As far as the developer agreement contractual dispute resolution, what's the next step after mediation?
So assuming the mediation process does not result in resolution of the dispute, then both parties have whatever remedies they have available to them under the agreement. So theoretically, if mediation fails, you could the town could come out and say, all right, well, we've sent you this notice saying you're in default. These are our remedies because you're in default and it hasn't been cured, and we're pursuing those remedies. They could either accept the exercise of our relief, or say we terminate the agreement hypothetically. They could say fine and move on, or they could say we're not going to accept that, we don't think you have the right, and it goes to the next stage, which would be litigation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Counselor Baumgartner?
Thank you. To follow up on that, we were going to be asked 3 questions just regarding inputs from the council. So in terms of the second question, if so, does the town council want to continue to allow Blue Lotus to attend those meetings being mediation meetings? I say no. Number 3, if the council does not want to continue mediation efforts, what is their direction or next steps? And that kind of brings us back to our first question being, does the town council want to continue mediation efforts? So the mediation really, and correct me if I'm wrong, but only happened because Respler invoked that process through the agreement. So that would be, let's see, so Respler Homes invoked the dispute resolution process, including in the agreement, the dispute resolution process being the mediation itself.
We had first invoked informal, and then they had then, when that failed, invoked, I believe, the next step being mediation. Is that correct?
I believe it was, we sent a default letter to
That's
them.
right.
And they disagreed with us.
Yes.
And invoked the pre-mediation process. We participated in that on August 31st. It was unproductive. The agreement then allows either party to initiate mediation. The town initiated mediation through the American Arbitration Association. I'm sorry, I don't remember the rest of your question.
And what made that initial pre-mediation meeting unsuccessful? Without getting into, obviously, disclosing any information that could, certainly jeopardize our town.
Well, I can't really disclose any information because the contract, the development agreement says that pre-mediation is confidential. But at the end of the day, it was unproductive.
So really, if there is nothing productive or fruitful that comes out of our mediation, the next step would be legal action. And that is clearly articulated even in our handout tonight. The next option would be legal in nature. The 2 parties fail to come to an agreement through mediation.
Yes, it would be, if we came out of mediation, either party would have any remedies available to them flowing from this contract, so.
In my honest opinion, just the timing again of Blue Lotus entering into the mediation, now I don't want to see at the 11th hour, but I see in no way do we have a productive mediation process without them in the room, which I think is the problem. And so just on the face of it, it's really unfortunate that we've gotten to this place. Especially I think we can all agree, and we all have varying viewpoints of what Mystic Oral School or Education Center redevelopment looks like, but we can all agree that the current conditions there are absolutely deplorable, have gotten worse, have deteriorated, to no fault of anyone directly, but the longer, obviously, this is prolonged, the more cumbersome and difficult it is to see anything happen there in the future. And that is certainly not where I would like to be, but I also recognize that I think no matter the outcome, Groton has a very strong case, and I think you would agree as well, which is part of the reason why we did move forward with holding them in default.
Counselor's time has expired.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Counselor Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attorney Callahan, would you advise us as our town attorney to have the full scope of information regarding this matter before us as counselors, representatives of this town, making a well-informed decision to protect our residents and taxpayers?
I would.
Great, thank you. I am not comfortable commenting or making any decisions at this time without the full scope of information, as I was elected as a town councilor and trusted. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion to reconsider going into executive session.
Point of information.
Is there a second? Second can come from the prevailing, the failing side.
Second.
Motion to reconsider made by Melendez, seconded by McBride. Okay. So I'll just speak to my motion. First of all, thank you, Attorney Callahan, for laying out all the information that you can in the open forum. I believe that in order for a majority of our counselors to come to a decision on the questions that the town manager is asking, they require going to executive session. Therefore, I can support going into executive session. Councilor Bordelon.
So again, I could too support, and I do appreciate, and I think as we move forward, I mean, these types of questions, what we can talk about that are presented here that are on our website, we should work towards making sure we do those like we did tonight. So these three questions, without the little details that will be added to that in executive session, we can come out of executive session and vote those three questions. Is that correct, town manager and attorney?
They won't be votes, there'll be a consensus,
But we could come out because there's nothing classified in those three questions. Is that, I'm just asking.
There's a
because-
potential of the third one being strategy, you know.
Okay, so the ones that we could come out, because I
Would you
definitely,
agree with the
number
first
two,
Eric? Seems to me we could.
yeah, I mean, number two, I would definitely say that I would not, I don't need any more information. I don't think Blue Lotus should be part of mediation. I can openly say that. But I think that if we can, I mean, if there's nothing really, and that's just the heading, and we're not talking about all the detail, if there's not a strategy behind it, just other, if, you know, I mean, do you think you want Blue Lotus that's pretty generic without any classified information? We should be able to do that outside when we come out. Is that correct, or?
My advice would be to discuss strategy and negotiation first, and then decide what to do with it from there.
Right. And if these questions were needed, we could, the ones that we could talk out on the outside.
I would give you guidance in executive session on which ones I think are appropriate to vote or have a consensus on publicly, and which ones you should not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Westervelt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear for myself before we go into executive session. So pre-mediation was confidential, so we can't know anything that went on in pre-mediation, correct?
I can discuss it with you in executive session.
Okay, and so I assume that's the same thing with the mediation efforts. You'll be able to tell us details in that you, okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands on whether or not to go into executive session, so I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so I have 7 in favor, 1 opposed, Baumgartner, 0 abstaining. So we're in executive session. Okay.
Did I?
Use mine.
Thank you. We are out of executive session at 10:27. Manager Burt.
Just to let the quick update to the public on where we're at concerning Mystic Ed Center. There was consensus unanimously to continue mediation, but to not allow Blue Lotus to continue in those mediation sessions.
Thank you. It is 10:27, so I'll ask consensus for the council to take up further agenda items. Okay, I'm not seeing a consensus to continue, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved by Baumgartner, seconded by Bordelon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously. 7 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. We are adjourned at 10:28.